Hello and welcome back to the Fretboard. My name's Mark French and I'm a professor at Purdue University. When I'm not professing, I work on guitars. I write books on them, I build them, and I help run the Purdue Guitar Lab here. Today I want to review cheap guitars. I am absolutely a huge fan of the $200 guitar, kind of like this one. This is a Fender CF-140S. I don't believe this one is in production anymore, but the equivalent right now is a Fender CD60S. And among the cheap guitars, Fenders are some of the best in my opinion. About 1,000 years ago, when I was first getting into guitars, cheap guitars were awful. Some of them were barely playable. And when new musicians started to struggle, they often assumed it was them when sometimes it was just a crappy guitar. Well, global supply chains and nerds like me have made it so that there are some very good cheap guitars out there. I am just a huge fan of the $200 guitar, like this one. So I want to start by reviewing this one, my Fender CF-140S, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how I hot rodded it, just because I can't leave well enough alone, just because the guitar works fine. But I just love this guitar. I paid a little less than $200 for it on Amazon, if I remember correctly. It's a basic folk guitar. It doesn't have any electronics or anything in it. It's got X bracing. It's got a solid spruce top. The back and sides are made out of laminated mahogany. Now, laminated is a nice word for plywood. And there's a lot of snooty opinions out there about whether sides and back should be made out of plywood. Absolutely they should. I know of no reason why a fine guitar can't be made with a plywood side and back. The plywood is stable, it's not going to crack, it's durable. What's not to like? The neck on this one is made out of, I think, mahogany, and it's got a nice scarf joint on it. 6 strings, of course. And the fretboard is made out of something that looks kind of like rosewood. It's unlikely that it's really rosewood, but it's some species that's mechanically equivalent. It's got an adjustable truss rod that you can reach in the sound hole here, and a nice hardwood bridge. This one looks like it might also be rosewood or some similar species. Fender is pretty good about putting the cost and the quality where it matters the most. And in this case, it's with a solid spruce top. Now, plywood for the back and sides is just fine, and I'm a big fan. The top, it does matter. For right now, there is no plywood that sounds as good as a solid wood top. So the top on this one is solid spruce. I have to apologize for the background noise. There's a building construction project going on right outside my window, and I'm trying to time the recording so I'm not recording while the jackhammers are running. If I miss, I'm sorry. Fender's not the only company out there making good entry-level guitars, but they're probably my favorite. Their product line is pretty diverse, their engineering is top-notch, as you would expect from a company like Fender, and their supply chain is very well developed. So they're getting good prices on quality work from around the world. This one is made in China, and the quality is just fine. It's straight, it's true, plays well, the neck aligns well, it adjusts well. The finish is a catalyzed polyester, I think. It's an industrial finish, and it looks really durable. You can drag this guitar around and you can beat on it pretty hard and it'll hold up fine. So if you're learning to play with a group or you're dragging it around to coffee houses or whatever, this one will do you just fine. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who's willing to leave well enough alone just because the guitar works fine, so I hot rodded this one a little bit. Now, this was a little bit of an experiment, so I put more work and more money into it than you'd normally put into an inexpensive guitar, but I'm really pleased with the results. 1 or 2 of the things I did were nearly free, and one of the things I did really wasn't. So let me tell you about those. Now, the first thing that you got to know about guitars in general, and acoustic guitars in particular, is there's a little bit of frequency error as you go down the neck. Now, this one is intonated pretty well, but on any guitar, there's going to be a little frequency error, particularly up here at the first couple of frets. So what I did is, based on some calculations I performed, and as described in those books, I took about 50 thousandths of an inch off the end of the fretboard, so I actually slid the nut down a little bit. This first fret I moved up about 50 thousandths of an inch, and the second fret I moved up about 25 thousandths of an inch. Now when I say moved it up, I don't mean I got to click and drag. I actually pulled the frets out, plugged the slots, and cut new ones. Up here, I actually cut some off the end of the fretboard. The other thing I did to go along with this, because this is kind of a system, is I intonated the nut. And again, it's all in those books. Now the effect of all this is subtle, but it's important. I notice the difference while I'm playing, and I also notice the difference while I'm tuning with my little clip-on tuner here. Got my little D'Addario clip-on tuner. This thing is actually closer to being in tune with those modifications than before. I mean, it was pretty close before. It was certainly what you'd expect out of a good factory guitar. Another thing you can't see is I went into the sound hole here with my arm and I shaved some of these braces down a little bit. Factory guitars tend to be a little overbuilt because they sometimes lead pretty hard lives. Well, I treat my guitars pretty well. So I got a little violin plane and some sandpaper and I went in and shaved just a little bit off the two X braces in here. So you can't see that, but I did that as well. Now the thing that doesn't make any financial sense but was really great as an experiment is I replaced the tuners on this thing. This guitar originally came with some die-cast tuners that were just fine. I mean, really nice tuners for the price. But I decided to replace them with a set of tuners made by Graphtec. These are called ratio tuners, and they have different gear ratios for each string, so you get the same pitch change per unit angle on the tuners. Now, like I said, this didn't make financial sense because these things are pretty expensive, but they are just great. It tuned fine before, but now it's just like butter. These, I would really recommend these as a retrofit. And the nice part about it is they're designed to be a retrofit. They come with these little aluminum plates that let you just unscrew the old tuner. You just back these little screws out. There's little number 2 screws. And you use a 10mm deep set socket to pull the nut off the front. Just push the old tuners out, bolt on these little aluminum plates, and just pop the new tuners in. Tighten them up again. The whole thing takes about 15 minutes if you've got a little practice. Maybe 20 or 30 if it's your first outing, but that's still not very hard to do. If you have the potential to get a C in junior high shop class, even if you haven't done it, you can do this. The other thing I did is I changed the strings. I'm a big fan of D'Addario silk and steel strings, so I put those on it too. And the result is just really, really pleasing. This is the best cheap guitar I've ever played. So there you have it. Huge fan of the $200 guitar. If you're new to guitars, or if you don't have a lot of cash, and these days who does, I really recommend you check out the Fender entry-level lines. The current model I'd suggest you check out is a Fender CD60S. I played one a couple of months ago in a guitar shop and really, really liked it. If this video gets enough views, I'll go ahead and buy a CD60S and I'll review that one too. So I hope this helps, and we'll talk to you next time.